Now then, out and about in the streets of the borough again. I've got my big coat on. It's red hot. Wrong choice of coat. And I loved it, you know. I was army barmy. I'm telling you now, right? I was a bit of a penguin marcher, I think, for a little while, and all the rest of it. I was a shit shot, actually. I was never any good with a rifle. Terrible.
And yet, when we grew up, this kind of stuff was normal, mate, wasn't it?
Now, for some boys in my school, that was a badge of honour. Don't know where I am, to be fair.
George, how are you, brother?
Very good, thank you, Chris. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite, man. I was kind of shocked. I was sat in a bar in Ireland. I'd been over there to deliver some training, and I got stranded. There was ice on the wings, and I was sat watching the England game. When your email landed, and I thought this must be a blag of this, because there's no way this guy had been messaging me. But here we are. Thank you for the invite.
No, my pleasure, mates. One of our kind subscriber friends out there said, Chris, you got to chat to this guy. He was in the British Army, got kicked out for drugs, substance abuse, and he told me a bit about your background, the struggles you had. We talk a lot on this show about the childhood trauma that many servicemen face, and yet it's completely brushed under the carpet by both the government and the MOD in terms of, you know, PTSD and this kind of thing. And then they made me aware of the incredible work you've been doing in the, can we say, the rehabilitation area and saving lives. So
absolutely, man.
Yeah. So mate, it's just right up my street. It's this is the good stuff about life, if you ask me, because I consider myself an enlightened individual, which means I no longer live in this identity that people think is Chris, which sounds a bit weird, but I know some people out there understand what I'm saying. I'm part of a much, much bigger thing here. But I couldn't have got here, George, if it wasn't for all my experiences in life and listening to people like you and really grasping, we can only have one set of experiences in this life, but by listening to other people and tuning your ear in, you get their experiences as well. And I've always been like that. I've always loved listening to other people's experiences. So let's talk about the British Army. Let's talk about the cadets first, because I'm going to find this fascinating itself. The thing is, when I joined the Marines, we had a few cadets join us.
Yeah.
And to be honest, some of them were the first to leave. and when it was analysed, or somebody analysed, they said what it is, Chris, is they get to like sergeant or colour stripey or whatever in the cadets, and they think they're really important. Then they join Limpston and they realise they're back at the bottom of the shit pile, and they get disillusioned. They kind of get disillusioned with it. So what cadets did you join?
It was the Durham Light Infantry at Hebburn TA Centre. I was born in a place called Hebburn, not Heaven. And it's kind of like in between Newcastle and Sunderland, right? So I'm not a Geordie and I'm not a Mackem, right? I'm kind of I was born in a place called South Shields, and when you come from South Shields, you're known as a stand dancer. What a shit name, do you know what I mean? So typically now when I'm out and about, people go, "You're a Geordie." I'll go, "I am." You know, the whole sand dancer thing's not great. you know what? It was kind of like Evan was just it was a funny old place to kind of grow up in. They used to have the shipyards down there, Swan Hunters and stuff like that. I went to like a Catholic school where as a young boy, it was hard graft in that school, man. It was like they used to hit you with rulers. The teachers used to hit you with rulers and bamboo canes. Like I used to have a patch over my eye in that because I had a lazy eye, Chris, and was a very self-conscious young man. Like I always used to look at other children and kids and the way that they played and interacted, and I used to think like I didn't feel the way they looked. I always felt like the outsider looking in many ways.
Let's George, can we just explain for our young people that might be watching what school was like for us? Because I think they'd be surprised to know that teachers could pretty much do what they wanted to you, and they did. Some horrendous stuff went on in schools. All of it wasn't even like it was brushed under the table. It was just accepted. You know, I had a school teacher strip me off once in front of the class, and then proceed to physically, you know, beat me. Yeah, and like if you did that now, you'd be looking at like 5 years in prison or something, and Absolutely. You'd be the most hated person in society. And yet, when we grew up, this kind of stuff was normal, mate, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And you know what happens, Chris, right? When you end up going to a junior school at the age of kind of like 7 and 8 years old, the age I was, right? Like I was frightened, right? I was frightened of being hit, right? So kind of my natural feeling was like, how do I stop myself from getting hit? And the way to do that was, well, you don't go to school. So I started like to scratch myself until I bled, or I'll be sick in front of me mum, right? And because if you're bleeding and you're being sick, you don't get sent to school. And I had a period of time off school, you know, like where mum ended up taking us to the doctors. Doctors weren't tuned into young people's mental health. They said, you need to go back to school. My mum had a faith, right? And she sent me to see a priest. It would not mention names and stuff like that. She thought if I got some spiritual counsel that I would be okay. And I got a bit more than spiritual counsel. You know, he didn't abuse me, that priest, he raped me. And he told me that if I told anyone what he was doing to me, that nobody would believe me. They would only believe him. And I believed him. And I didn't tell anyone. And, you know, secondary school, Chris, like, you know, kind of you talked about, like, being stripped naked in the school I went to in heaven, right? They beat the shit out of you with leather straps across your hands as hard as they could fucking hit you, right? They'll take your fucking hands off like grown men and grown women, right? Now, for some boys in my school, that was a badge of honor. Now, the hard lads, right? Like they would be going out to try and get six of the best. But when I used to get hit, right, they hurt me hands, but they hurt me mind more. Do you know what I mean? It was like, I was, by the time I was like 13 or 14 years old, right, I'd been physically abused and assaulted by teachers who were hitting us with straps. I'd been sexually abused. Do you know what I mean? I was being told in the school that I would never amount to anything. I wouldn't be anyone. I didn't really fit into a social class in my school either. Do you know what I mean? You had like the trendies, if you like, who were wearing the pod sandals and the kappa stuff, and I didn't fit into that group. And then you had the academics, and I didn't fit into that group. Then you kind of had like people who were like a little bit overweight, and they had a social group of their own. Even they were saying, you're not in my social group either. Like I was creating a social group in my school, and I was the only member. Do you know what I mean? And I couldn't wait to get out, man. I couldn't wait to be away from that relentless like degradation and just, oh man, it was, you know what, man, it was a really, really horrendous time where what you said, Chris, was if that happens now, you're on the front page of the national press and you're in prison. But when we were younger, it wasn't like that, was it? Do you know what I mean?
We had one teacher, he used to hit you as hard as he could. And as his hand came down on your backside, right? And I remember watching the lads shunt halfway across the classroom because that's how hard he hit them. He used to just try to get them to like shoot across the floor. And of course, who was it? Was it the middle class kids or the rich kids? No, it was the poor kids, wasn't it? You know, it was the kids that were probably getting abused at home in some way, either mentally, physically, or emotionally, or financially. Were the kids that got pulled out of the front of the class because they couldn't focus in school. They had too much stuff. And this teacher, he just took great pleasure in how far he could get them, you know, to shoot across the floor so we've covered that bit. Just want for people out, I just want them to understand this is what a lot of us went through. And this is just you ain't heard nothing, folks. You know, this is the stuff that we can say.
And I suppose, Chris, as well, it's the stuff that people like feel confident about saying as well, isn't it? Like, you know, for me, I'm at a place in my life now where kind of there's never problems, there's only opportunities. I've made sense of my past, and I'm always going to be an open book about kind of those different kinds of traumas which I experienced. Lots of people your age, my age, others, males and females, went through lots of different kinds of traumas who don't feel comfortable about kind of opening up, and they're living their lives in a state of kind of like maybe it's post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe it's all of that trauma. But like, you know, for me, one thing I should say is like, I had really loving parents, you know, everything in my home environment was absolutely fantastic. But when I left there and I was put in the charge of adults in school, where I spent probably more time than I did with my bloody parents in some ways, that's where I got all of that abuse. I think one of my saving graces though was when I was about 13 years old, I used to walk up from the school I was at, up the bus stop, I used to see the TA centre. And I used to hear a little bit of shouting and all that going on in there. And I got a bit intrigued and then ended up going up there and joining the army cadets. And I loved it, you know, I was army barmy. I'm telling you now, right? I was a bit of a penguin marcher, I think, for a little while and all the rest of it. I was a shot, actually. I was never any good with a rifle. Terrible. But you know, man, there was something for me about kind of when I've been going there for a month or two and I was like going up in me civvies, and then all of a sudden I got this bag of kit to take home with us, right? Like I walk home and like filled with pride, right? Couldn't wait to show me mum and dad my uniform, and they were always people who like they always showed me like so much love and positive regard. They were really excited for me. I'd have the iron out, I'm getting me fucking kit, lovely bull in me boots and all that. Like for me, I think what was happening was like I had a new identity. Do you know what I mean? It gave me like, you know, being George was never ever enough. Do you know what I mean? And kind of like, I always felt like I was in a race to become a man. Like being a kid, I just wanted to get to the finish line, be a man, everything's going to be okay. And that wasn't the case for me. But I do remember like putting that uniform on and shaping me berry and learning to march a little bit better and having equality almost, like, because you didn't have that social, that class which existed in school. It didn't exist in the cadets. You were all there, you had a bit of banter, you were messing around on the backfield, like, you know, learning different skills, annual camps, smoking tabs and all that, you know, without your mum knowing. And it was fucking great, man. And I think for me, I knew early on, man, 13, 14, the only thing I want to do with my life is I want to be a soldier, right? It was absolutely like, it was in me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't good academically at school. I was too frightened of failing that I ever really tried. But I knew the one thing that I could do probably was become a soldier.
George, I want to come on to that, but I just want to give a little caveat here for friends at home. There were some wonderful teachers also back when I was young. I'll say wonderful. I hope they didn't know what the other teachers were doing, because if they did, they should have come and protected you. And also I am aware there'll be people watching that are like, I had a wonderful childhood. What I was born in, what you on about? And that's fine, friends. You know, we're not saying this was everybody. What we're talking about here is childhood trauma, and it was for, I'm going to say, many of us, you know. And the whole point we're getting at isn't to like live in the past and hate people. We're trying to highlight the recruiting pool that the military recruits from, these disenfranchised, for the most part, young men, but obviously young women as well. And as George is pointing out, who have very little in their life, no self-esteem because they've had it knocked out of them. And you can already start to see how the army gets its claws on you through things like the cadets. I mean, before that, George, you had Action Man, didn't you? And all the all the toys, which
couple of Barbies as well, I have to say. Like, no, I didn't have any Barbies. It was all Action Man. Do you know what though, Chris? Like, again, though, there was something for me about kind of like being like indoctrinated in some ways. Do you know what I mean? It was like my life was messy. My head was frenetic. Do you know what I mean? And what cadets gave me early on, it gave me like order and structure and positive regard, you know. So like for adults to look at me, you know, and kind of like, you might have got shouted at a bit and given a bit of a beasting, but never hitting the cadets, you know. And I had like positive male role models who were saying to me, your uniform's really tidy, Charlton, do you know what I mean? Like, your boots are fucking really well bulled. Like, there's a Lance Corporal stripe for you. Like, you know, the positive reinforcers were all there for me. Do you know what I mean? And like, I joined the military band as well. I was up at Gateshead. It was the Royal Engineers. I was only like 15 years old. Me and a kid called Monkey. He got called Monkey because he was hairy as fuck. Do you know what I mean? When all of us were just starting puberty, he was just hairy as fuck. You know what I mean? So hence he got the nickname Monkey. But me and him used to go up to the TA and we learned to play the bugle and the drums, and we started playing with the TA band because we're quite good. At the Cenotaphs on Remembrance Sunday, I'd be blowing the bugle, the Last Post and Long Reveille. And I was really fucking good, man. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, fucking hell. Like, I've got goosebumps for that right now. I've got fucking goosebumps thinking about, like, those times and those moments. Because if I'm honest, man, right, I hear you, and I like what you said as well. There was good teachers about, right? Teachers aren't now the way that they used to be. I'm convinced in my school, every teacher knew what was going on, and nobody said no. It was just the culture at the time. But for me, from the age of kind of as far back as I can remember, probably until that time, when I was like joined the Army Cadets, I was a mess. When I joined the Army Cadets, I had hope. I felt like kind of there was purpose and meaning in my life. But you know, around that time, brother, it was like late 80s, early 90s, bit of EDM comes in. Before you know where you are, you drink. My substance use, started out with C2H6O, the most dangerous drug on the whole planet. Do you know what I mean? And alcohol. Right? It's so like people who kind of go, alcohol is this social lubricant and life-giving. Like, it's the best marketing job ever fucking done on any of us by Diageo, right? Because we don't see alcohol as a drug, and it kills more people every year than all illegal drugs combined, right? But for me, when I started, like, 16-year-old, starting to drink a bit of alcohol, starting to smoke a joint and all that, right? What I started to realize was that substances for me could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. So when I had a little drink, rather than people laughing at us because I was an idiot, they started laughing at us because I was quite humorous. So again, positive regard. When I smoked a blunt, if you like, I'm conscious I don't want to be kind of using drug names because of
it's good
algorithm. So like when I started having to smoke, right, like it absolutely kind of sedated me because I think, right, I've definitely got some undiagnosed ADHD, right? So like my mind's always like that. So when I had a smoke, it would slow me down. When I had like for the first time, man, God, I'd arrived. I'm telling you, man, I absolutely arrived. Like I grew a couple of inches taller. My patter was even better than it is now. I became a better dancer. I could talk to the girls. Like, you know, there wasn't one point when all of this was going on where I seen substances as the problem. They weren't the problem. They were my solution. Because what it allowed me to do was put all of that trauma, which had gone on for, not for a week or a month or a year, it had gone on for a long time, you know. It allowed me just to kind of almost dump that in some ways and feel good and feel okay. And I think a lot of the time we hear about the negative aspects of drug use, and there was many for me later on. But at that time in my life, drugs were really helpful, and we were all in the raves.
Substances, George.
Sorry, substances. Yeah. We were taking all kinds of everything, going into big dance halls with hardcore music, with people from all over the UK, and that idea, like, of kind of just hugging people you didn't know, and great conversations, and dancing the night away. It was just it was a really magical time then. A really magical time. I kind of seen myself as this is heading towards being that man. Do you know what I mean? This is good now.
Do you remember that the army used to come into schools and recruit? Did you have that at your school?
Yeah, in St. Joseph's, yeah, definitely. You know what happened? I bottled it, right? Because I was going to go as a junior leader, right? And I bottled it. I went to the Army Careers Office, was in Shields, and I was making my way up there, and I couldn't do it. My relationship with my parents was kind of codependent in some ways. I think it was, I very much felt only safe around them, and the idea of joining when I was 16 or something like that, it didn't happen. But what happened with me, Chris, was the substances are all good until they're not, right? And what happened with me was the devil's dandruff became an everyday thing for me. I found out that you didn't have to pay £10 for a gram, that you could get an ounce for 70 quid. And I would get that ounce with the intentions that was going to last us a month, but then it would last us a week. And I've heard your story, Chris, and it's extremely inspiring. And I know where your substances of choice took you, and you, not sleeping, people shouting on you, and there's nobody there, a little bit of psychosis and stuff going on. And I had a moment of clarity. I think I was probably 19 years old. I had a moment of clarity where I thought, whoa, I need to do something here. I was doing a YTS at the time, a youth training scheme, and you got paid the grand sum of money. I think it was £19.50 a week. Can't believe it. £19.50 a week I used to get. And I used to work in shops. I was a sales assistant in shops. What I realized was when I was working in these shops was if I put a baggy pair of jeans on flares, what that would allow me to do was go into the stock room and put a couple of pairs of Levi 501s underneath my trousers, then put my trousers on top, and then nobody would know that I would have them there. And then I could sell those jeans, which would enable me then to start buying more and more amphetamines. And I think it there was a couple of close calls for me where I nearly got caught, and I thought, no, I need to go and join the army. And if I'm honest, my thinking was that the military could become my rehab, right? So I needed to get away from the substances, and I made the daft decision that in order to get away from the substances, I need to take substances with me. So I had delusions in that, Chris. I wanted to be a pilot in the Army Air Corps with not a single GCSE, and I still haven't got a single GCSE. Or I wanted to play the bugle with the Royal Marines. Is it what do they call it? Is it Albemarle Barracks? Not Albemarle. What do they call it? Where the Marines play?
They're in Deal in Kent.
Okay, so that was what I want. That was what I wanted to do. So I went in there and I said, "What do you want to do?" I told them. They said, "Fill out the aptitude test," and they come back and said, "You can be a blanket stacker in the Ordnance Corps." I was like, "Fuck, right, I love it." So I ended up the medical and everything else, and then went down to the basic training at Deep Cut, Camberley in Surrey, and loved it. Loved it, man. I'd been in basic training for about 2.5-3 weeks, man. Right? It was I wasn't using now. What I had took with us was it wasn't amphetamines. I took cannabis, and I took a 9 bar, 350 quid, 9 ounces of cannabis. Right? And I thought if the amphetamines get on top of us in some ways, or I can have a little smoke, nobody need know. And I'd been in basic training for about 3 weeks, and this lad turned up late. And you can guarantee in my life, I always meet a fucking nugget. And it was a nugget who turned up. It was a kid from Middlesbrough. He got put in my billet with me. And we started I forgot where I was. I was like, he was going, he said, "What's where you from?" He says, "Middlesbrough." I said, "Oh, did you used to go to the Coliseum and the Eclipse and all that, the raves, eyes." And we just started like that euphoric recall. Before I knew where I was, I said to him, "I've got some cannabis. Hey, Nick, let's have a smoke." And we went into the toilets. I rolled a blunt, picked my bit of dope up, put it in my pocket. He rolled one, but he left his on the toilet floor. And then we got out. having a smoke in the military, get in, no one knows, do you know what I mean? Stoned, feeling like a right clever shite. And then by the time I got back, the sergeant was standing there with a couple of squaddies around him with everyone pointing at us, them, and I'm now stoned in the sergeant's office where he's got a little bit of dope, but then also a 9-bar of hash going, what's this? And my world just fell apart.
Had they got that out your locker, had they?
Yeah, under my locker. Because I think what happened, Chris, I think people had recognised that me and this other kid had become thick as thieves. Do you know what I mean? And you know what? And we got grassed up at the end of the day. It was other recruits going through training that grassed us up, and it is what it is. You know, I was pissed off and resentful at the time, but you know, for me, I've always struggled in my life to think about kind of the chain of events. So if I do this now, what's going to be the impact and the actions going forward? Do you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, here I am in front of the sergeant, then taken down to the guard room, put in the cell in the guard room. I was the guy that was always phoning me dad every night. How's it going? Telling him how good it was. They wouldn't let us phone me dad. So that was a bit unusual, but my dad kind of accepted, oh, well, he must just be busy. Second night, they wouldn't let us phone him. So my dad then phoned up the guard room. They said, we've got him locked up. We can't tell you what's going on. He's going to need to tell you yourself. I ended up speaking to my dad. He's saying, what's happened? Like, how do you then begin to tell your dad, who's done national service in the RAF and was a cop and all that? How do you begin to tell him that you've been caught with a 9-bar of hash? So I said, listen, I've just made a daft mistake. I wanted a can of pop and a chocolate bar. So I've ended up jumping over the fence to go to the shop. Like, I'm just bullshitting. Do you know what I mean? So like, they've got us locked up for going AWOL. And he went, oh my God, I hope everything's going to be okay. I said, I'm sure it will be. And then as it turns out, the military police came from Pirbright and kind of ended up in front of Lieutenant Colonel Elliott. And he said, I can send you to Colchester prison for a year. I'm not happy with that. I want to get extended powers, which he did. And I got sentenced to 2 years in MCTC, at which point when I ended up back on the phone to my dad was saying, you don't get fucking 2 years for a kind of pop and chocolate, George, what's going on? And I kind of guess I had to be honest with him then and say, I've been struggling with drug use for a number of years, substance use for a number of years. I've been caught with substances within the army, and I've been sent to Colchester prison, and that was it, on a minibus and off there.
I mean, I'm guessing you had a lot more leeway than we did in training, because I can't, for a start, we was all in the same room. There was, started off with, I think, 52 of us in one room, basically. It was called the induction block when I joined. They've changed it now. They call it, there's another name for it that doesn't sound as bad as induction. It sounds like brainwashing. I think they call it foundation now. But anyway, but even like when we went to our rooms, there was 6 blokes to a room. So it wasn't like you could have, I didn't even like know about this shit back then. I mean, vaguely I think I'd smoked a couple of joints when I was about 18, and it's that typical thing that nothing happened. So I thought, oh, I'm not missing anything, you know. My thing came later it came later in life, and I'm fucking glad, really, because it's a burden in a way, isn't it? There'll be people listening that are getting all angry and upset now, but that's because they've forgotten the bit about the childhood trauma and how this guides us to make, decisions that to other people seem really stupid or thoughtless or illegal or whatever they are. But
But you know what? But that, Crystal, I think the thing for me, it's absolutely about kind of being respectful to your audience as well. You know, it's like what we get pumped, right? What we get pumped through the press and the media is like the demonization of kind of people who use drugs. Do you know what I mean? Right. So we have this whole focus that kind of like that it's bad people who take drugs, that all drugs are really, really dangerous, kind of drugs are illegal for a reason. And in many ways, it's kind of like a whole unjust thing. Like if you look at the harms of drugs, right, surely drugs should be weighted against the harms that they cause people. So if you look at cannabis, for instance, right, like the drug that I got caught with, yes, it's illegal, right? But like if you ask each other, like how many people died last year as a result of taking cannabis, the answer is none. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you'll still get criminalized for it, right? Whereas when you look at alcohol, which some of those people who are watching this who now be raging with me, right, for using drugs in the army, how many people died from alcohol specific deaths last year? It was 9,500 people, and alcohol's legal. Do you know what I mean? So I think the thing for me was it's really important to kind of to recognize, right, that there's a global evidence base around this next point, right? That if you think about the UK, right? So last year, 3.2 million people used an illegal drug in the UK alone, right? So it's like, it's 1 in every 11, 9% of the UK population. That's staggering, right? 1 in 11 people used an illegal drug last year, right? So those 3.2 million people who use substances, they're not in drug treatment. They don't need to be in drug treatment because the reasons why they're using their substances is for whatever reasons they do, for recreational purposes, for medicinal purposes, for joint pain, whatever that is, right? But they're not dependent drug users, right? The greatest risk that they face is twofold. One is they're going to be criminalized for their drug use because they're illegal. And two is that the drug markets are left in the hands of organized crime gangs and they put anything in the substances, right? But what the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime says, right, globally, is that around 10 or 15% of people who use drugs globally go on to develop issues like I did, right? And the reason that they develop those issues is because of adverse childhood experiences and traumas. So what we know through the research is for a young person who experiences 4 or more adverse childhood experiences compared to a young person who experiences none, right? The kid who has 4 or more is 11 times more likely to go to prison, is 11 times more likely to use illegal drugs, is 7 times more likely to be involved in violent crime. This isn't by accident. And I think the learning that we have to take, and this is why I'm so vocal and open about kind of my journey, whether I'm teaching cops or the military or the NHS, whatever, right, is we've got to stop looking at kind of like this guy, George, is the addict with a scar on his head, involved in criminality and crime. And we have to remember little George, who got raped off a priest, who got the shit beaten out of him in school, who got hit when he was 8 and 9 years old by teachers who got told he was never going to be fucking good enough. Do you know what I mean? And lots of people are like, oh, well, that was just how it was back then. But fair play, man. But for me, long before I ever took a drug, I was broken. Long before. And I'll tell you what, Chris, right? I've felt some shame in my life, right? But never like the shame that I felt when my only fucking career choice got taken away from me. Do you know what I mean? And 2 years in Colchester prison, hanging on with the slightest hope that if I impress the commanding officer there in the prison, right, that I might get something going back to a recommendation going back to my commanding officer to say he's going to be an asset to the army, which he did. And my CEO said, "Yeah, fucking binned, go home." And I did, with nothing, with shame, with guilt, a disgrace, to the one thing that I knew straight away that would help me feel better: drugs. And then that cycle just amplifies, man, where it's not about using drugs anymore to feel good. It's about using drugs to stop feeling bad. And the drug use isn't about dancing anymore or MDMA and having great times. It's about fucking, you can't bear to be in your mind because the everything inside you tells you you're fucking useless. You know what I mean? So your drug use changes to opiates and then to other kinds of substances, and you're in locked psychiatric units and you're chopping your fucking self open with fucking razor blades so you understand what I'm going through. Do you know what I mean? And you hurt your fucking self and you hurt your family and all of those people around you. And then what everyone does when you're like that is they go, look at that piece of shit, lock them up, throw away the key. I was a broken man that needed love and compassion and support. Do you know what I mean? I didn't need to be criminalized. I had nothing. No, nothing at all, man. Nothing at all. And after I came out of that jail, man, I went through a place of just real darkness and pain and like hurting my parent. My dad was 75-year-old. Mum 73-year-old. He's lying on top of us in his house while I'm slashing myself, slashing my face open. Fucking slashing and slashing. And he's crying and saying, "George, please, son, we love you. We love you." I didn't love me. I didn't see the way out. And then, of course, what they do when you're there, Chris, is you get detained under the Mental Health Act, get put in the bead wing in South Tyneside Hospital, and I fucking loved it in there. The bead wing was mint, right? So like you get jigsaws, you get sandwiches, you get Lagactyl, and you get Theorazine. So kind of in order to treat me in my addiction, what they did was treat me with drugs that kind of, I got a bit of a buzz off, but you know what they did was they numbed me. They took any light that I had in my life, they took it out of me, and I kind of made a conscious decision when I came out of that mental health unit that enough was enough. My mum used to take a drug called warfarin. You don't get a buzz off warfarin; it thins your blood. She had a lot of strokes and stuff, so her blood used to coagulate. So warfarin thins your blood. So I started stealing those tablets, and I started stealing DF118 dihydrocodeine, which is a really powerful opiate-based painkiller. And my intent was that my mum and dad were going to be going away for the weekend down to my cousin Jackie's house, and when they went down there, I was going to take the tablets and I was going to slash my wrists, and that would be from that. And they went, and that's what I did. I had a wet room in my mum's bathroom, but she couldn't step into the bath, so they could create the wet room. And I thought that I would cut my wrist in there because I wouldn't destroy the carpet. And that's where my mindset was, that my parents would be angry about blood on the carpet, not a dead son. And that's what I did, you know. And it's imagine our life's went crazy, right? But my dad, we've been driving for about an hour. My dad's kissing my mum. Something's not right here. Didn't have mobile phones. He just said, "There's something not right here." They turned the car around in there and came home and found me bleeding out in the bathroom. And of course, what happens then? You end up back in the mental health unit, detained under the Mental Health Act, going around that fucking whole system again, the shame, the guilt, like trying to medicate my way out of problems which were entrenched in trauma, you know. And unfortunately, I ended up being seen by psychiatrists and psychologists, and ended up in a residential rehabilitation centre in Sunderland in the year 2000, and that was kind of the beginning of the new me, Chris. Been mad, man. It's mad, you know. Like, I'm conscious when I was talking to you just there. I was lost in a process there, man. I was just like, I was just feeling what that feels like, you know, to be where I was, but also thinking about like the hurt of my parents. You know, they were fucking lovely people that didn't need that. But you know what? I was hurt. I was fucking hurt many years earlier. Do you know what I mean? Many years earlier. Crazy.
Like, I think of my story, and it's equally as tragic. Just, you know, there's no one story in addiction that trumps another, but you do hear, as you just said, it's quite, you know, I mean, I crawl across a wire between two skyscrapers in Hong Kong.
You're nuts. You're right. Nuts even when we're not on anything new.
I know, but I was so mentally unwell that I thought my Marines training was for that moment in time. And if I could crawl between, I'll say skyscrapers, probably tenement blocks is a more apt term, but you know, if it's over 30 feet, you're going to fucking die if you fall off, right? And I'm 70 meters up in the sky, genuinely in my mind thinking, this will get me all my answers in life. This is what all my military training was for. And to anyone who loved me seeing that, they'd have just been beside himself. So that was nearly like you've just said your way out. My way, it was like that. But here's the thing. I didn't have that self-hatred because I was so fucking defiant to like look after me. Yeah. I mean, obviously I wasn't doing a very good job, but I want to go back to the Colchester thing, because that's that fucking scares the shit out of me just thinking about all that military rigmarole and some of the people that you probably met. Hopefully you met some nice corporals and that in there, but it's also what, when we talk about illegal substances, mm-hmm. It's quite a handy framework, isn't it, to offload a whole load of shit onto vulnerable people again. Whereas what we should be talking about is that the most dangerous substances known to man are alcohol and prescription medication. All the stuff that everybody watching now has probably got in their house.
And the culture that the military actually actively encourages their people to get involved in. If you're not getting pissed out your mind, then there's something wrong with you, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? But again, it comes down to that. It comes down to that. The smoke and mirrors, doesn't it? Of kind of that alcohol's legal, so it's okay. Cannabis isn't, so it's not okay. And I think kind of in hindsight, you can and you know better than me. I remember on this minibus, typical army minibus, kind of going fucking hell, scared, didn't know what was going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Ended up going through the gates at MCTC. It was an open prison. You were told if you want to escape, get yourself away. Do you know what I mean? There's no big, huge fences to get out. You can go. Do you know what I mean? But we're going to come after you. And we were in I don't know kind of what people think about MCTC, Military Corrective Training Centre, Colchester. People was it's hardcore, but it was clean. It was it was a working prison, so you were doing training. Do you know what I mean? I'm led to believe that lots of people who come out of MCTC go back to their units if they've had minor offences. They end up getting promoted quite quickly after that because you've been absolutely switched on. Do you know what I mean? So for me, again, whilst initially the shock of it all was horrendous for me, and having to be honest with my parents and that about what I'd done, very quickly I fell into that routine. That was, for me, that was the brilliant thing about the military. I was army barmy. Do you know what I mean? That the structure, I didn't mind it. They had you doing 10-mile battle runs around the city. Do you know what I mean? With white labels on your epaulets. So there was a bit of public humiliation in some ways there when he did that. But you know what, man? It was the lads I was in the billet with were all right. A lot of you get a bit of a beasting. There was one sergeant, I know his name, but I'm not going to say it. He had a little white moustache, and he was fucking horrible. He used to call me, he used to say, "You fucking horrible Jody maggot." He had it right in for us, man. Right in for us, right? And he tortured me, right? It didn't matter how much I tried to win him over, he tortured me. But then you get a few privileges, so I would end up then kind of getting to clear out the sergeant's mess and all that. So I'd be pinching a few dumpers, do you know what I mean? You'd be able to get a few rollies out of that. And like I said, inevitably I was hanging on to kind of the hope that I'd be able to go back to my unit and hopefully soldier on, do you know what I mean? But it wasn't to be. I got back there. I got told I was going to be discharged, and I was put in open arrest. So basically, whilst I was back at my unit, turned up at the guard room morning and the afternoon. I was a runner by one of the admin blocks. I met a sergeant there. Was he a staff sergeant? Who said he kind of befriended us, I felt, in some ways. I came back to my unit, and I imagine I wasn't very popular with anyone there. But he was all right on us, this guy, and I used to kind of be running mail and all that all over for him. And I always remember he said, "Listen, when you go home, son, you've been fantastic here. If you need a reference, give them my details. I'll give you a reference." I thought, thank fuck for that. So eventually, when I ended up leaving and got home, I've always been good at talking me way into jobs and stuff. And I managed to get myself a job in a garden centre. They asked for a reference. I give his name, and he sent a letter back saying this lad was chucked out of the army for drugs. Don't employ him. And I didn't get the job, obviously. And again, it was fucking hell, man. Just lost a lot of faith, and it comes back again, if people want to judge and go, "Oh, well, it's your own fault, you chose that." Trust me, on careers day at school, when the careers officer said, "What do you want to be?" It wasn't a lifestyle choice for me, right? I didn't consciously make a choice to destroy my world. But Chris, as I said, not drinking, not using, still a mess. And what that tells me was that the drugs and the alcohol weren't the problem. The way I was using them was. The problem I was left with when I had a period of 12 months abstinence was I'd still never dealt with trauma.
How did you deal with that, George?
Well, quite. So the rehab that I went into was very much focused on kind of like alcohol and drugs. It was a 12-step based program, so kind of like a spiritual program that kind of gets you to identify a higher power in your life. You recognize that you're powerless over alcohol and drugs. I kind of bought into that. I buy into everything. I'm all in. I'm not like you. Like you're running up and down the whole length of the country, and that I'm still trying to just run 10K without stopping. But like when I go into something, Chris, I'm all in. So I absolutely bought into that program kind of really heavily, but it didn't really focus on my past traumas. It focused on the way I was drinking and my attitude towards alcohol and drugs and all the rest of it. It never really got into talking about those past traumas. And I think I'd been there for about 9 months, and they said, "Look, you're going to be leaving shortly." And it hit me like a steam train, because again, I had the security of those walls in that rehab. Do you know what I mean? And the thought of being outside, it terrified me. You know, there's that analogy, isn't there, which is like fear, FAAR, which is like everything and run. And that's what I've done all my life. Do you know what I mean? Or FAAR, which is face everything and recover. And so I signed up to do a counselling course, not because I wanted to be a counsellor, but because I wanted to learn how to communicate with people without feeling self-conscious and scared. And I imagined that people who were maybe doing a counselling course might go easy on us. It was a 12-week course at Sunderland Uni, and I think everyone passes, right? It's not the most academically challenging course in the world. So I went along, right, and I started doing my thing and started opening up and that, and I wasn't getting any judgment, and they were teaching you a little bit about like writing and how to write assignments and stuff, and I started getting some passes. Do you know what I mean? And again, it was always about positive regard for me, because I've never seen myself as good enough. But like all of these people around us are going, "Oh, you're a really nice lad. Your essay was really good. It was nice to connect with people that way." And at the end of 12 weeks, I got a certificate given to us in the class, and two things happened. The first was, it was the first thing in my life I'd ever started and finished, right? So I felt a huge sense of achievement when I passed. And then second, when she gave me that certificate, right, I got fucking goosebumps everywhere. And for me, what it did for us, it was like, I thought, you can feel the way that you used to feel using substances, but you can do that through doing something rewarding and worthwhile. So I thought there was only one thing to do, and that's to enroll in another course. So I ended up doing like a level 2, a level 3. I got accepted at Durham Uni. I did a postgraduate diploma, a degree. Then I stayed on and did a master's in counselling as well. And then all of the time, like as part of doing your master's at Durham, you have to have 40 hours of personal therapy. And that's kind of when I started kind of getting into working with therapists who were less concerned about the alcohol and the drugs, but then wanted to start talking more about kind of like my past experiences and traumas, and that started to make sense, you know, to kind of realize I didn't stand a chance. I didn't stand a chance because I was always going to statistically, I was always going to end up somewhere. Do you know what I mean? Somewhere in a place of negativity. And I think when I found that place, you know, Chris, that's when like everything just amplified for me. And like, you know, kind of, I did a little bit of volunteering. Like, I mean, I still haven't got a GCSE. I've got a master's and I've got degrees. I still don't have a GCSE because I failed miserably at school. But then I started like doing a bit of volunteering in drug treatment services after I'd been in rehab. And then that led to kind of paid employment, doing structured daycare. Then I realized that all of that bad stuff that happened needn't be bad stuff. If it was framed in the right way, it could be something really, really positive to help other people. And I guess that's where I kind of I recognize like that everything in my life happens for a reason, and that the worst thing in my life that happened was addiction, but the best thing in my life happened was addiction, because it then gave me this. The last 20 years for me has been like working in drug treatment providers, becoming really disillusioned working in some of them, setting up a social enterprise myself, going in and training. Like I train cops up and down the country to be ACE aware and trauma informed. I go into schools and do drugs education for kids. And
I think a lot of people have lost a lot of faith in the police over this last 3 years. I saw an awful video this morning of them being provided with the the statistics. I'm not going to say what this is about, George, because we get in trouble, but people out there know what I'm talking about. The statistics of the injured and those that have died, and many of them are children. And our police force has just completely sloped shoulders for 3 years and allowed this to happen. So they're not the most popular with me at the moment, although I will be the first to say, you know, we've all appreciated a copper turning up when we've needed them at a, you know, but
yeah,
it's that trauma informed. I remember one of my I did a degree in youth work and a master's in social work, or I did a year and a half of a social work master's. And a part of that, we had the police come in one day, and it was just a bit embarrassing for them because it was a female. Not that was anything to do with it, but this woman got up there and she's going, yeah, and this lot, you know, out on a thief whenever they can, and then they're all doing this and they're taking it, and of course we're all sat there as, you know, trauma-informed individuals that understand, no, the reason they're doing all that is they come from really damaged backgrounds, and all you're going to do is lock them up and then punish them even more. And where's the rehabilitation? Where's the love? Where's the peace? Where's the kindness? Where's the empathy? Where's the, like, what has this person been through in their life to mean that they're out robbing? Not saying that, you know, you should just, that there shouldn't be a comeback if you steal something from someone. Of course there should, but it was just
painful.
Well, George, it highlighted the lack of understanding between services, you know. It was the same. Absolutely. It was the same. I worked in a treatment facility. So I was what you'd call me a substance misuse specialist, which I certainly feel that certainly feel that I am. And you'd have to go up against social workers that were just so brainwashed. All they wanted to do was drug test people. And I just used to put my foot down and say, I'm not here to punish my clients. I'm here to get, you know, to get help them get some balance in their life. And I don't care what they put in their body. What I care is have they got some control over it, and do they understand the implications of what they're doing, but particularly when there's children involved. But the social worker, they just did not, for them, it was all punitive. Test them, catch them out. And I had to try and explain that, you know, if that's all I do as a substance misuse specialist, they're just going to start lying to me. Then you lose that therapy. You lose the therapeutic relationship. They can't come and talk to you. They just see it that, oh, if I tell Chris that I, you know, used some heroin the other day, he's going to go and tell and I'll lose my children. And it's we've got such a long way to go, George, haven't we? You know, we've got such a long way to go for professionals to, you know, the best kind of professional is that one that says, George, Chris, look, I just don't know about this. I'll bow to your judgment because you're the specialist. What do I do? But it's the one that has already decided they know best, you know, the copper or the social worker.
And you know, for me, Chris, sorry, like if I can just interject, I mean, kind of, it would be wrong of me not to because I think, like, in my experience, right, like with my youthful good looks, it's hard to believe that I've been around forever, right? But like I've been training cops for like 20 years, and there was a time when I would go into Northumbria Police, and I'd be training 20 years ago. I'd be training custody sergeants, and I'd say, "My name's George. I'm going to talk to you about addiction," and you'd see them straight away going, "They heard it all before." Do you know what I mean, right? And I think kind of like where the police is concerned, right, it's this huge institution, right? And like huge institutions, like they can get it wrong and get it wrong kind of absolutely big time, right? Like I feel for me that, and this is, I suppose it's quite incongruous actually for an ex-drug user who's been criminalized and locked up and in the shit with the police all the time to be somebody who will actually speak out for the police in some ways. This isn't for me about kind of, I don't know in particular the thing that you're talking about, but we have seen lots of negative press for the Met and all kinds of stuff, right? Now, this for me is like, there's kind of issues which are institutional in terms of problems and everything else. However, what I have to say is that, like, in my experience of the last 20 years, I've met some really fantastic, like, officers. I've met some kind of high-ranking officers who want to do the right thing. I've worked with some amazing police area commands. So if you look where I am in Durham, for instance, right, Durham Constabulary have actively kind of done what they can to offer to have like sensible drug law reforms around drug use. So when when Ron Hogg was alive, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and Chief Constable Mike Barton, they were kind of the view that if somebody's got 5 cannabis plants growing in the house, fucking leave them alone. Do you know what I mean, right? It was like they brought Mike Barton and Ron Hogg, the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner, they brought We Are the Loop to Durham. We Are the Loop do drug testing at festivals. They had a city centre drug testing facility where they said they created a whole amnesty space around the place they were testing and said, if you use drugs in Durham, come forward, we're not going to touch you. We don't want you to die. We want you to know what's in your drugs. Do you know what I mean? They've been really proactive, right? In many ways, the police force, the police services, ironically, if I think about the sector that I work in, they're in many ways the driving force around harm reduction. So they're looking at drug diversion schemes now, where if you're caught with any drugs, so West Midlands police do this, Durham police do this, Thames Valley police do this. We've got a domino effect now, where if you're caught with any substance for personal use, rather than getting criminalised, because that fucks your chances of your job, your career and everything else, you can go into a substance use service and they'll give you some drugs education and make sure you know about the drugs that you're taking and how to do that safely. And providing you go along to that appointment, you don't get a criminal record. Do you know what I mean? You've got officers who are carrying this stuff, Naloxone now. Do you know what I mean? So, like, we understand that.
Explain Naloxone to people, George.
So Naloxone, so very quickly, 2 different kinds, I suppose, Chris. So I'll just do it. I'll do it right. Hang on. I've got one here. So what you'll find is, right, naloxone hydrochloride is a drug which reverses heroin overdoses, right? So if we think about last year, there was 4,859 deaths, drug-related deaths in England and Wales, 1,300 deaths in Scotland, probably another 1,000 in Ireland. It probably amounts to kind of like just short of 7,000 deaths, right? That's 17, 18 people who die every single day of a needless and avoidable drug-related death. And what we know is over half of all of those drug-related deaths involve an opiate, like heroin or morphine or methadone or codeine, something like that, right? So typically when people are dying, right, or they're overdosing, they're not on their own when they overdose. So there'll be another drug user who's with them. Do you know what I mean? Or there'll be a family member who's with them. So this drug here, naloxone, this kind of this instantly reverses that heroin overdose. So this one here, right, this is an intramuscular, right? So it's kind of like you have a syringe, which you would pop a needle on the end. When you give naloxone, it goes in the top of the arm or it goes in the top of the leg through clothing. And we give this drug 1 dose at a time every 2 to 3 minutes. What the law says about this drug is that anybody can carry it and use it for the purposes of saving a life. You don't have to be a health professional in order to do it, right? So the police are a little bit weary of this one. Durham Police isn't, they use it, right? The National Police Chiefs Council are a little bit, well, it's the Police Federation actually, are a little bit concerned about liability for officers. So if they're using the syringe, right? So they're not keen on that. However, what officers are using now is this drug, which is exactly the same. This is Nixoid. So they both contain the same substance, they're just different routes of administration. So this one's literally just up your nose, 1 dose, and it's going to help people to come around, give them valid time that they need to get in an ambulance and have their lives saved. So again, we're seeing dominoes toppling with regards to policing and cops wanting to carry it. When I'm training cops now, Chris, right? I'm going to Lincolnshire Police in a couple of weeks, South Wales Police. There was a time when every cop I was teaching was older than me. right? Now, every cop I'm teaching is fucking younger than me. I'm old enough to be their dad, right? And the great thing about that, right, is that we've got this new cohort of officers coming in who've lived a bit, who've maybe done some substances, that they haven't been institutionalized right now, and that the police forces are actively going out the way now to say to people like me, can you tell our officers about the pain of your childhood? So when we come across somebody who is entrenched in an addiction, our first thought isn't, look at this heroin addict, but it's kind of like, wasn't it Dr. Gabor Mate who said, not why the addiction, but why the pain? And this is, for me, so we have got all of that other shit which is going on, and I'm not minimizing that at all, right? I'm not minimizing that at all. But you know what, man? I think a bit like saying that one or two people who are addicted to drugs who are fucking nightmares, they don't represent the whole kind of population and demographic of people who use drugs. And I think it's the same to be said that whether it's the thousands of officers who are up to no good, right? They don't represent the demographic of the other 50,000 officers who are trying their best. Do you know what I mean? That might make me unpopular, but you know what? I've got pals and acquaintances who are cops who afford me the opportunity to go and fucking educate. And I won't pull me punches. Like if I see a cop being a dick, like when I get it between the eyes, I'm not scared of that warrant card. Do you know what I mean? Then I think for me as well, in schools is very different as well. Because again, I don't know, like, was any drugs education in your school, Chris?
Literally nothing. The first thing I had was in military, and it wasn't an education. It was, how can we try and terrify the hell out of people? And it was just that classic thing that when you actually did end up taking a few yourself, you're just going, what was all that shit about? Oh, Jesus, they're telling you, and I'm not condoning anything. I think people just need to live their own lives and use everything as experience and just try to find your way to enlightenment, folks. That's all I can say. And don't judge other people, because I think that just says more about who you are as a person than the person that you're judging. But yes, it's no, none at all, mate. No, everything I've done is all been through myself and through wanting to learn, really,
I think, for us, can you remember, right? So for me, I don't know that in my school we had any drugs education at all. But what I do remember was this, right? When I were a lad, I knew, right, there was a show on the telly called Grange Hill, right? Grange Hill, right? And there was two kids in Grange Hill at the time, right? Not this Grange Hill. People go, Grange Hill was on a couple of years ago, wasn't it? No, we're on about the 80s, right? And there was two kids in there. One was called Zamo and one was called Danny Kendall, right? And Danny Kendall and Zamo, right? Both of the names of their characters, right? Zamo went into the toilet in a school, right? And he injected heroin, right? And he had an overdose, right? And there was the footage, the last shot of like Grange Hill was of Zamo on the floor with a pin. Wasn't that graphic? Do you know what I mean? But he knew what he was doing. And the last shot was of him going over. And then the camera backed out. And then this whole idea, they came out with this song, which was on top of the pops, and it was called Just Say No. Just say no, right? Say no to drugs, right? What a load of horse. What a load of horse. Because a bit like you just said there, right? When we say to people, don't be taking drugs because you're going to die. And then what you said, Chris, was that you had a kind of some shit education in the military. They basically said, don't do this because it's going to knock you. Then you did it and you realized, well, now what you said was going to happen didn't happen. It's the same for young people, right? So the idea of just saying no to drugs doesn't work with young people. We have to give them the KNOW, the knowledge to make informed choices. Because typically what tends to happen is, across the globe, we haven't created environments where people who use drugs can speak openly and honestly about their drug use without fear of punishment, negative consequences, whatever, right? So if you go up to a cop and you tell them that you're using drugs, right? Well, I'd like to think that would be well received these days, but majority, if you get caught, you're going to get locked up. With kids, right? When I'm doing drugs education in school with kids, right, I say, right, because they get to see who you're seeing now, this potty mouth, tattooed, Geordie stereotype, right? So I'm in the school and go, right, I'm going to talk to you about drugs. So listen, this is a little bit about me and my background. I say, I want to ask you the question. So if you're thinking about taking drugs, would you tell your teachers? They go, what? You're mad, you? No, of course we wouldn't tell the teacher. And I'll go, why wouldn't you tell the teacher? I'll go, because we're going to get suspended. We're going to get in trouble. We're going to tell our parents. We're going to get social services. I go, all right. So you wouldn't tell your teachers. I'll say, what about telling your parents? They go, yeah, we think you're still using drugs, George. I go, what are you on about? See, there's no way we're telling my parents. And you go, why not? Because we're going to get wrong. Do you know what I mean? And what that tells me is that young people today have nowhere to go and talk or explore any views or opinions around drugs. And the thing is young people take drugs. I'm sure it was, what was it? It's 1.4 million. I think young people between the ages of 16 and 24 used an illegal drug last year, right? But they've got nowhere to get the information. They cannot ask adults.
Can I just chip in something here, George? So it was Nancy Reagan that come up with a Just Say No campaign. At the same time as her husband, at the same time her husband's administration was importing cocaine via from South America via Nicaragua, turning it into crack, putting it out and basically blaming it on the black community, who did become, a large part of the victims or the sufferers, and when the Grange Hill kids were invited to America to meet Nancy Reagan, I don't know if they actually met the president. They're at the White House, and I can't remember if it was they're all in the bathroom snorting coke, or they were in the White House grounds skinning up behind a bush. So it just shows you, like, trying to frighten people and just saying no. It doesn't work for people that deep down it's beyond, like, your control. I mean, I've just got that character, not because I'm stupid, but because I'm a lifelong learner. So if you tell me not to do something, I want to know, well, what experience am I missing? And I wasn't like this around substances. I was quite sort of standoffish to them when I was younger, but that was just like in my mind, because the actual reality was, I think I had my first cigarette when I was 11. I was smoking daily by 14. I was drinking 9% homebrew, down, like literally down in pints of it at 14 with me mates. I think I got drunk for the first time around 13. My mate, Luke, who me and him were mods together. So we was all like watching Quadrophenia, and they're talking about Purple Hearts and all this stuff. So we would try and get high at every opportunity, even though we didn't know what we were doing. We were smoking banana skins, going through the herb cupboard, going, what's this oregano? Would that work? I don't know. Right. One time we actually thought we found some Purple Hearts, and Luke went, "These are me mum's hormone replacement tablets."
Oh no!
We're like, yeah, get some of them down us, and so clearly, like, but no, I think I'm going to tell you something here, right? And I hope people can learn by this. Do you know when I first realized that I had childhood trauma, even though I didn't know what that term meant, and I didn't know, it's only looking back I can understand it, is at 10 years old, I would rush home off the bus from school to put the kettle on to make a coffee. I didn't know why, George. I just knew I wanted that coffee. I wanted that coffee, right? And of course, that was addiction manifesting for the first time. It was changing the way my mind felt, because I guess that took my mind off the underlying trauma that I didn't even know was there, because I didn't even know what that shit was, So
now I get you, and you know what it is, though, Chris. What you're talking about there is like we often say, don't we? Something. Oh, I had a great night last night. I was out my head, right? That's what people. I was out my head. Normal people say that I got smashed, but that idea of being out my head was what addiction was about for me. My drug use was about early on. Was about great times, dancing, raves, woo, had some great times, right? I'm not saying all the times when I took substances were bad, or weren't. I had some of the best times ever, driving up to the Royal Highland Showground in Ingliston and selling ecstasy, MDMA and ice pops off the back of an ice cream van 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean, right? I had some great times. But then the idea for me was that these substances were used to get me out of my head, because in the cold light of day, what I was left with was hurt and pain and trauma and all of those memories. And I think the thing for me is like what happened to me, it happens to kind of like 10 or 15% of people who use drugs globally, right? That means there's like 75% of people who that does not happen to. That doesn't mean that they can't get a dependency issue. Do you know what I mean? But the way that we do that is through introducing this idea of harm reduction. Do you know what I mean? So telling people that like the safest way to take a drug is not to take them. However, you're not going to listen to that because you want to take drugs. Of course you do. People want to change the way that they feel. People drink alcohol, not because it's nice. People aren't drinking alcohol because it's nice. They're drinking to unwind at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? With having a little smoke at the end of the day. They're having a coffee because they want to feel stimulated. We can't get on with the rest of the day unless we have that coffee. And everyone will recognize what you're saying there. It's just some of these drugs are legal. Tobacco is legal. It kills more people than any heroin does or crack cocaine does. They're all drugs together. It's legal. And this is the madness, right? Is that if you're drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes or sugar or coffee, then you're going to have some sense of like how you should be doing it. We're going to have labeling on products and everything else. But when it comes to kind of cannabis or other drugs, right, we're not allowed to talk about that stuff, right? And this is where people get harmed, right? So this idea that when I was younger, maybe when you were younger, Chris, like we would purchase like substances, we'd get a pill, we wouldn't think about the pill, we would just net it. And then invariably we would trust that we were going to have the night of our lives. And in the most part, we did, right? But there's something happened now where that very same pill doesn't just have like a no, if you could ever say a normal adult dose. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if I can talk about dosing or not, or whether you just want us to avoid it. But like there's kind of like one certain substance, I'm not even going to say it because it just, what would happen now is like in one pill, the pill's not bigger. Pills were back in the 80s and the 90s, but some of these pills contain 4 times the safe dose. So when a person looks at this pill, they go, oh, that looks all right. You can never know what's in that substance by looking at it because it's being made by organized crime gangs. And lots of what we've seen around some of the fatality around MDMA and stuff like that is that people are taking substances which have like 4 times the safe adult dose. Do you know what I mean? Or that they have imposter drugs, which are kind of sold as like MDMA, but it turns out to be N-ethylpentalone. And we don't create environments for people to stay safe. Instead, what we do is we create environments where you've got to score, you've got to get your drug, you've got to take it quickly because the old bill's going to get you, when all of the evidence points to the solutions, which is around likes of drug consumption rooms and safe spaces for people who use drugs. You know, the idea of drug consumption rooms, people go mad about them. There's about 500 of them in Durham rooms, and then people are in them. My wife was in one last night. Do you know what I mean? They're called pubs, right? And what we do is we make it safe and we regulate and we ensure that we're not drinking pure ethanol because the government gets involved. Do you know what I mean? But when it comes to people who use drugs, we're like, the scum of the earth. Well, the scum of the earth in some ways. But things are changing, Chris. Things are changing, and I just feel like I don't know, man. I'm like I'm honestly like I'm doing all kinds of different stuff with like whether it's that drug there, right? I train active drug users, right? How to use this. Then I give them backpacks filled with it, and I send them out into the community to go and engage with their peers, to have conversations around overdose prevention, overdose management, what they're going to do in an emergency, how do drug users spot the signs and symptoms, and then we give this stuff away for free so we can start turning the place yellow. Because if we think that half of all drug-related deaths involve an opiate, if we can get this out there, right, and everyone carrying it, then somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody may live to end up going on a bit of a journey like mine, because this saved my life, right? My life was saved through this drug, right? And I'm here talking to you now. You're a legend in my eyes, right? I'm here talking to you now around like the last 20 years for me, which have been fucking amazing, right? And then, you know, the 15 years before that, they were painful, but they were, that was my apprenticeship, right? That was my street degree, right? And it took 15 years to fucking get it. And I'm so glad that I got it. And now I just wonder if I can, Chris, just quickly dip my toe back in here, right? You know, the military thing, right? Because I'm like you, right? I think I am in any way. Like, I get up in the morning, right? I do some meditation to try and silence me fucking scatty mind, right? I do a bit of meditation, lots of hydration. I do some journaling. I kind of cascade love out. So I send a few people some messages. They wouldn't be expecting to get the messages off us, but I'm just going to send something nice to people. I'm a firm believer in kind of what you put out. Like, life is a reflection, you know, you should treat it fucking right. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of where I come from. But the whole army thing for me, I carried like some real guilt and shame because of that, right? And even when I'd kind of started getting my life sorted out and everything else, and I was delivering all these different sessions and doing the work that I was doing, there was still a part of me that felt a great kind of regret that I'd let my unit down, and that I'd let the sergeant and that down and my peers down. And then I've got some pals that work for Northumbria Police, and they phoned up and said, 3rd Royal Horse Artillery had got in touch from Albemarle Barracks in Newcastle, and the commanding officer asked, could they have some drug and alcohol education for the squaddies up there? And the police at Newcastle said they didn't feel equipped to deal with it. Would I go up with them and do an input, right? Well, it was like, fucking hell, I tell you, my heart straight away, boom, boom, was pounding out my chest, adrenaline, like, fucking hell. And like, for me, didn't know how it would be received. So I drove to Newcastle, ended up driving in a cob van up the Albemarle Barracks, just up in Ponteal, and pulled up to the gates. You had the guys there with the SA-80s, do you know what I mean? Kind of checked in the van and kind of went through, and then all of a sudden I'm like right back in this military environment. And it was mad, you know, because like, look, I wear t-shirts like this, nice, people take drugs and all that, Naloxone saves lives, and I've always worn t-shirts like that. I didn't. That day I had a shirt on and my top button fastened, and I had a grey jacket on with like a bit of corduroy like elbow patches on, and some small trousers, and some brown shoes, because like it meant something even before I got there. Do you know what I mean? And then we got met by a guy called Chris Gent. I'm sure he was a lieutenant colonel, and by the RSM, Jay Bulmer, to call him, and got off the van. There was exchanging pleasantries and all the rest of it with the officers and that there. Inspector Rob Bosson from Northumbria Police, and I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But either way, so they kind of said, "This is George." You know what I mean? I was kind of like give them a handshake and all the rest of it, and kind of still just when we headed down a little bit, you know, not Billy bullshit and bravado boy that you people are saying now. You know, there was a sense of like, there was a sense of, I don't know what the sense was. Anyway, we got talking to the officers. Go on.
What was he wanting you to say to the lads? Were they accepting that, you know, the militaries across this section of society, and a lot of this stuff goes on? Were they recognizing that, or were they wanting you to scare people off, or what?
No. They went to they spoke to so they had a relationship with Northumbria Police in any way, do you know what I mean? But basically they'd had a number of discharges where people had been testing positive for MDMA and cocaine, so they'd been losing a few good lads, actually, do you know what I mean? And they kind of came to the police and said, look, we need to do something here, because like obviously when they're on their leave or whatever they're doing, they're coming back having that, what do they call it, an MDT, is a mandatory drug test or something, and then they're testing positive in that bin, you know. So it wasn't, so then obviously the cops have went, well, we've got this guy who trains our officers, you know, we think he'd be really beneficial. So kind of like, so then up there I went and got taken into the officers' mess. It was fucking bizarre, man, right? All the cutlery and everything out there, like the officers are being waited on, and all that's in the back of my mind is somewhere in this what would you call it, God? What do you call a place like? Would the unit? What do you call it? The military garrison? No, it's not a garrison. What's the word I'm looking for?
A
So like
barracks.
the third barracks. Yeah. Somewhere in the barracks. I just knew there was a load of squaddies who were going to want some drugs education. But anyway, sat down, we had some dinner and all the rest of it. Chris Gent, the CEO, was really nice, man. He kind of sat and listened to us and kind of put me at ease and stuff. And it was a bit of a confessional, if I'm honest, Chris. You know, it was a bit of like, I wanted him to hear that I was sorry, man. Do you know what I mean? And he heard that, man, you know, and he kind of said, look, just relax, man, you know, like things happen. Do you know what I mean? Things happen. You're here now and it's going to be okay. And I ended up walking into this big hangar with just like, there was like 500 soldiers all in their uniform, like with me standing in front of them, like George, and I fucking and my dreams were broken because of one fucking decision that I made. Do you know what I mean? And I think like the tone of what I was saying to the people who I was with was like, not like drugs are bad and they're going to kill you, right? Drugs are dangerous. We have to echo that. We're not condoning on this podcast that people go and take drugs. I mean, people who watch this podcast who do, though. Do you know what I mean? Nicotine, whatever it is, alcohol, maybe some MDMA users, whatever. Nice people take drugs. That's the place where I come from, right? But what I wanted to get these soldiers to recognize is that for me, my dream was to be a soldier. And I know, kind of listening to you on other podcasts, Chris, and I have to say that like it's really humbling and to and inspiring to listen to your story. Do you know what I mean? But like for me, I didn't get to do those 22 years, and maybe if I had, I don't know how long you did, but maybe if I had, I might have thought a different way about it. But for me, something that was the thing I wanted more than anything else in my life was taken away from me because of a fucking stupid decision which I made, where I didn't think about the chain of events that would happen after. And I guess that's what I wanted to do with those soldiers, was to get them just to think about like the chronology of events here. Do you know what I mean? Like your pension, forget it. Do you know what I mean? Like forget all of that. You know, forget about any loyalty from your mates and that, because you lose it. You know, your family which you've got here, the military family, forget it. It's fucking gone. Do you know what I mean? Like you've now got a conviction for drugs, so go and try and get a fucking job when you're out there, because you're not going to get that either. Do you know what I mean? And it was an inspiring thing for us to do. And the beautiful thing, you know, for me was about a week after I'd done it, it was a brown envelope came through my front door, and it was like a hard cardboard envelope. I opened it up, and inside there was some like a pastel yellow piece of really decent paper, and on the top of it was the crest of the Third Royal Horse Artillery, and a handwritten letter from Lieutenant Colonel Chris Gent to say that he was proud of me, and that I should feel no shame for what happened when I was younger in my career, and that like what I did that day, as far as he was concerned, was payment back. And you know what? I broke down, man. Fucking broke down. I've still got the letter as well. It was like, it allowed me to fucking forgive myself. Do you know what I mean? So again, for those of you who think earlier on, well, you shouldn't have been doing drugs in the army. Well, you know, I've paid for that, man. And I paid for it more than just getting chucked out. And then we struck up a bit of a friendship, him and I, and also the RSM. And I was doing this thing called Run Every Day January for mental health. I'm not sporty, but like I do this thing like every day in January, you've got to run. And Chris Gent heard that I was doing it. He said, "Oh, come up to Newcastle, me and the RSM will run with you." So I said, "What time do you want to meet?" He said, "Well, we'll meet underneath the Tyne Bridge." He said, "About fucking 0500 hours." I was like, "Fucking hell." And we got up there. He got his driver, brought him up. Him and the RSM got out. They were off. And I'm running behind them, trying to keep them, trying to look cool. I think it was the fastest time I'd ever done 5 kilometers in my life, and I just couldn't wait for them to go. So they said, "See you later." I was like, "I see you later, Chris, see you later, Jay." And as soon as they went, whoa, fucking puked up everywhere. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know. It's like, feel like blessed, humbled, excited, like there's no words to describe, kind of just like the opportunities that came out of that darkness. You know, I've got a tattoo on my arm here. This is by Sir Francis Bacon. it says, in order for the light to shine so brightly, first the darkness must be present. And I had a lot of darkness in my life, and thankfully that I did, because without that, then I wouldn't be doing any of this lovely stuff now. I've got a beautiful family. I've got a gorgeous wife. I'm definitely punching above my weight. I've got 2 great kids, Madison and Charlotte. Charlotte's at Manchester Uni studying a criminology degree. Madison's she's 13, doing really well at school. She's a police cadet. She trains other cadets how to use naloxone. I've got 2 dogs, Harlow and Megs, and I've got a cat called Raven. And I can genuinely be found up and down the motorway in my car, listening to dance music, and doing all that I can to kind of help humanize people who use drugs, and help those people who hate and demonize them to look in the whites of their eyes. Because when you look in the whites of the eyes of a drug user, they're the same as yours and mine. And everyone deserves a first chance, a second chance, a 10th chance to just have time on this beautiful planet. Because you know what, and you know this is it today.
Yeah, this
is all you got. So what are you going to do? And from me, I just choose to fucking connect with people like you who inspire me and give me hope. So thank you, man.
No, thank you, George. It's a two-way thing. Your positivity and your story must be, well, it is infectious, and there'll be people out there going, hang on, why am I bashing my head against the wall and living this shitty life where nothing works? I'm just pushing myself to an early grave. And here's George and Chris that are going, hang on, there's a lot more out there. There's an awful lot, and it's better. It's just so much more fun. It's so much more fun.
But doesn't the out there though, Chris? Doesn't the out there, there's so much better out there, start in there?
Yeah, it starts in there, and also it takes a bit of effort, folks. Yeah, you know, we're not just talking here about substance misuse. Whatever your shit is, you've got to make a decision. Do you know what? I actually have to do something. I have to do it. It all starts with taking action. And in those early days, the action, it can seem hard because you don't see the reward for it. It might not all come in one day. It might take a week. It might take a month. It might, if you've been doing opiates for years of your life, you've got to give your brain a chance to get back to normal, to stop being deadened by you, to start firing again in the way, make the connection with the universe, and boom, that's when it happens. And that's when, you know you can never go back. And you won't ever, you won't, but it takes a bit of effort, folks. I'm just going to finish off a couple of things here. I get lots of messages from people. Chris, I wish I joined the Marines, but my mummy said I couldn't, and I regret it. I don't feel like I'm a man. Oh, shut up. Right. You can crack on with your life, right? The past does not exist. If you don't believe me, get a cup, go back and get me an apple from when you was 10. Go on. Hey, can't fucking do it, can you? Because the past doesn't exist. It only exists in your fictional, it is a figment of your memory. And the only thing to be gained by beating yourself up over all those silly decisions that we all make. I wish I'd done this, but I'm present enough to know we've only got the now, folks. You've only got the now. I never even think about yesterday, except the good stuff. And I learn and go forward. You know, my identity doesn't lie in the stupid decisions I made last week, yesterday, maybe this morning, 10 years ago. And it certainly doesn't lie in a bad mistake or a decision or an action I took when I was 18. Life's too short. Start smiling, start today, make the connection with the universe, which I suggest everybody does, because that's when the good stuff starts to happen. And that's that. And if you're struggling, reach out, because you've got people like me and George that have been there, right? We've been there. We know what it's like. I feel nothing but pride in my life. I think I'm a fucking massive legend.
You
I think,
brother.
well, I'm talking to one too, mate. You know, I'm talking to one too, because I've got, and like George just said, I've got a paradise life. I've got the most beautiful partner and a little one that I just can't believe I fucking deserve, to be honest, right? I've done whatever I want, whenever I want. I've done everything in this life, you know. And so I must have made all the right decisions, right? So even the ones that other people will probably judge me on because, you know, that's their stuff. Well, they're wrong, aren't they? Because, you know, it's all about experience, folks. And if you just want to have good experience in this life, you're just going to end up a bit of a sissy with a crap life, with you know,
Chris,
you've got to have the lows to learn your technology. You've got to have the lows, and when life gets even better is when you learn not to think of them as lows or highs, but as experience. And just going to say, George, if you can send me any links where anyone listening now that is struggling, we've got a help link tree at the bottom of the description box, folks. There's a few military kind of links and stuff in there. But George, if you send me some of them, and also send me if people want to book you to speak, if they want to book you as coaching, if you can send me all your links.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to say, friends, if you can like and subscribe to the podcast, we're trying to do what we can in mental health. We're trying to do what we can for struggling veterans who make up a significant percentage of the homeless statistics, the mental health statistics, the prison statistics, the substance using. You know, there's something not quite right there, is there? We're trying to do our best. If you could please like and subscribe and consider supporting the Patreon or becoming a channel member for $1.99 a month, that will really help us. Thank you. Last word, I'm going to hand over to George.
So I suppose to me, it would be absolutely remiss of me not to do this, right? Would be to say that, Chris, thank you very much for allowing me the time to talk on your podcast. I know you've got a really wonderful following. This substance here is free and it saves lives, and you can get it for nothing, and training takes like 5 minutes, right? So the biggest gift that you could give me would be that you go and get trained, carry naloxone, and have it on your person in the event that you see someone and you can save their life. I'll send Chris information on how people can get access to naloxone. But thanks for allowing me to be me, and thank you, Chris, man. Lovely to meet you, brother. Really appreciate it.
Stay legend, mate.